perhaps have questions that you'd like to run by me. But I'd like to start by just commenting on the abomination bill that they needed J.D. Vance to pass the tie-breaking vote. It was 50-50 in the Senate, and now it's back at the House. And this is a uniquely unpopular bill, but it really speaks to the people who voted Trump into power, whether or not they understand the devastating impacts this bill is going to have on them personally, because the messaging is to distract people from what's really going on. And I want to be clear that if you're one of the 17 million people who may be cut from Medicaid, that this is going to affect predominantly red states, people who voted for Donald Trump. And this is care that's going to be denied from people who need health care. So it's not going to just affect individuals who have cancer, veterans who have trauma and such. It's going to affect all their family, friends, and communities too, because they're not going to get the help that they need. And this is a transfer with the tax tricks that they have in this bill. It's going to transfer money to the wealthiest who don't need more money and take away services to the rest of us. In the meantime, making ICE the largest military presence in the United States. It's going to be funding that. We saw Trump and DeSantis buddying it up at Alcatraz, Alligator Alcatraz. It's a new facility to make people afraid they're going to be sent there to rot in the heat in the Everglades. There's so much more I want to say. But I just interviewed Ann Nelson yesterday for my Cult Conversations podcast. Ann wrote The Shadow Network about the Council for National Policy. And I recently read her book, Red Orchestra, which was all about the Berlin Underground, some 3 million Germans who resisted Hitler. That I've never heard about a resistance within Germany. And the fact that some 300,000 people were caught by the Gestapo for their activities opposing the Hitler cult regime and were murdered or sent to concentration camps and murdered. But the point here in this day and age is to understand that we're either going to fawn and capitulate and put our heads down and pretend that it's not going to affect us, or we're going to build broad coalitions and stop fighting amongst ourselves because we have differing viewpoints and come together to be pro-democracy. Pro-democracy, not just anti-Trump, but pro-democracy. And messaging needs to start coming together with leadership that gets people framing the issue is we want human rights. We want to support women's rights. We want to support health care. We want the right to know what the weather is going to be, if there's going to be a storm, a hurricane, or a heat dome coming our way. We want accountability, right? And we want the ability to work now on a precinct level, which means in your local community to sign up for the school board, to run for local elections, because that's going to be the key, person to person, to next year's election. And all I can hope and pray for is that we win back the House majority and the Senate, and then in 2028 to pose the right wing, because now I'm hearing Trump's son wants to run, even though Steve Bannon continues to say Trump's going to run a third term. What I see of Trump is he's melting down more and more. Anyway, those are some of my opening remarks. I can only say that I continue to want to speak out and educate people about undue influence and share my expertise. We have some really excellent things coming in our new YouTube channel. Premium subscribers, we're now putting out next week's video a week ahead for premiums, and we're going to be doing more individual things. More things coming on Substack. We're up to 156,000 followers now on Instagram, and we're looking for more volunteers, people who want to help us with blogging, messaging, sharing material online, because we're a small operation and we are community driven, so we're asking for help. So I'm looking at my screen, but I can't read the words. They're all fractionated, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask my team to copy the questions and put them in a signal where I can read it. The picture was great here at the beginning, but now it's gotten funky again. So I don't know what's going on. I'm more empowered than ever, realizing that we're living at an existential moment, and my whole life has been speaking out against authoritarian cults and malignant narcissist cult leaders. And I still am of the belief that we need to sorry, I'm reading something from one of my people. It's distracting me at the moment. And I'm noticing. So if Cami, if you can put the things that are on the screen into Signal, or Jerry, that would be awesome, so I can read it, and we can use the live stream thread. Would be awesome. So I lost my train of thought, so forgive me. All I can say is we need to step up our game, know that we're not alone, build broad coalitions, meet people in person, and I predict there will be millions of ex-MAGA believers, millions, at least 17 million if this bill gets passed, who are going to be really pissed off. And they're going to be needing health care and they won't have it. And people will need food for their children and they won't get it. So what's going to happen in those red states with those GOP politicians who signed on to this? You think they're going to get reelected? Oh, and I left out the Musk thing. Musk is at it again, and Trump was talking about deporting Musk, which is fascinating.
Hi, Stephen.
And
This is Jerry,
hi.
the producer of the show. I can
Yes,
read some of these questions for you if we can do
that
this
would
quickly
be
if you want to.
awesome because I
Okay.
can't read.
All right.
Thanks.
Umami Food Design has a question, and it says, a question, kind of a statement. It says, I read that alligator Alcatraz will cost $235 per person, a day per person.
Yeah, so this is could be true. It sounds low to me, but and I think that the alligator Alcatraz is more for terrorizing people and making them afraid. But I'm against the privatization of prisons anyway. And it incentivizes courts to put people in jail when they're not even guilty. And we're seeing this with ICE. They're picking up not criminals, they're just picking up anybody. And we see the agenda that's being announced, that they want to take away birthright citizenship. If they don't like you for whatever reason, they want the ability to deport you. And it's terrible. So I see something else on the screen, Jerry.
Next question is from Samuel N. Richardson. It says,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on the trans theoretical model and stages of readiness for change, and how that may affect conversations with loved ones in the cult of Trump.
Um, I've been encouraging people to reach out to family, friends, coworkers who, in the past, have voted for Trump and are MAGA supporters and wear the hats. I've always been saying, don't shun them, don't call them names, uh, be warm, be curious, ask them questions, wait for an answer, follow up, and stop trying to argue, to be right, to persuade with logic or facts, but try to make that common ground connection with someone. Find out if they're a parent. Do they love their kids? Do they love their siblings? Work off of things that are going to build community, things like love and truth and accountability, and ask people what matters to them. What are their thoughts now when they're hearing the news? What and encourage them to ask you questions that might give them a different perspective on things. I had a very interesting conversation with Adam Mockler, Mockler. If you haven't uh, followed him or seen Adam, he has a YouTube that's like 1.36 million followers, and he's very interested in engaging MAGA people to get them to reality test. And he's posting clips of interactions that he's having with MAGA folks. And I told him that I really want to share my expertise with him because I think I could help him be a lot more effective in the way he's interacting with folks. And he seems all interested in doing that. Oh, I want to thank Nancy Wallace, who's a regular. Hi, Nancy. Thank you again for the super chat. I really appreciate all your continued support. Honestly, it's going to be a community effort to keep us messaging, developing great content, and building more awareness around the fact that brainwashing is a real phenomenon. Authoritarian cults are real. Science matters, and to mobilize former members who have real lived experiences that are going to be invaluable for other people to learn about. Is there another question?
Yes, Mrs.
Yes.
Ms. Squared Duck, Miss Squared Clark, sorry.
Ah,
They don't understand. I saw a post today saying that these cuts will only affect the undocumented. What's the best way to approach such nonsense? They don't appear to be swayed by the facts.
yeah, so I still am planning to do some video demonstrations of how I would do it. But if somebody said to me that the cuts won't affect them, only undocumented people, I would react and say, oh, interesting. That's so different than what I've heard. Tell me your source, please, because I'd like to check it out. And engage them seriously. Don't just say that's nonsense, that's ridiculous, or whatever. Engage them where they're at. Find out what their source is. Ask them if they're open, if there's evidence that they would accept as real, of changing their mind and realizing that they may be lying. But it's that kind of warm, curious questioning that's effective in my experience, not judgmental, controlling persuasion. That gets people's backs up. That gets people's defensive. Starts validating in their mind that you're bad or you're evil. And some of the MAGA folks are truly very spiritual people. They really believe in God, and they think that God has chosen Donald Trump. And if they're religious, I would engage them on that level and say, I believe in God too. I believe that God is almighty. Do you believe God is almighty? And I might get into my Garden of Eden story that I use for decades when I'm helping people in Jewish, Christian, or Muslim cults, where I talk about, the Garden of Eden story and how Almighty God could have brainwashed Adam and Eve to be dependent, obedient zombies, but he wanted children. He wanted humans to be in his/her image. But the point is offering new perspectives. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yashira Ramirez, 7, says, don't Medicare cuts basically go into effect when the next president is in office? Coincidence? Heck no.
Yeah, so this is part of where I depend on trustworthy lawyers and journalists to tell me what's actually in the latest version of the bill. Because some things may be written that'll come into effect in 30 days. Like I understood that the recent Supreme Court decision regarding injunctions and saying that federal judges can't issue injunctions against the president. My understanding is that will take 30 days to be placed into law. But I don't know. And this is a general thing that I want to say to all my listeners. Life's uncertain. Nobody knows with certainty, and when people say, I know more than the generals, it's like you should automatically distrust whoever's saying that, because I want to follow people who are willing to admit they made a mistake or change their mind as new evidence emerges. I know that's how I live my life. And I invite cult members to recruit me as part of how I'm effective at helping them to reality test, because I make myself vulnerable for them to try to convince me. And I always share my Mooney experiences, and I have yet to meet anybody who isn't a Mooney, that is, who thinks that some young moon was the Messiah and was 10 times greater than Jesus, and that the Moonies are God's only true church on earth. So they'll listen to my stories about the Moonies and how the Moonies gave $2.5 million to Donald Trump a few weeks after the January 6th violent insurrection to endorse them. Like, that's a fact. It's widely reported, even by the Moonies as well as by mainstream media. Let's see. I'm seeing something in Signal now. The crazy-haired mom on Instagram asks, recently read Friedman's A Failure of Nerve. Really brought to light how important it is to be strong enough to not let the emotional side lose sight of the goal, democracy restored. Couldn't agree with you more. And I want to just emphasize the way our minds work is we have a narrow band of attention consciously. Our unconscious is much broader and can take in lots of data, but it has to go through the filter of our beliefs and our consciousness. And part of the strategy of psychological warfare that's being waged on us is to throw so many things at us that we're constantly having our attention moved away from what needs to be the core focus, which is being pro-democracy. Pro-democracy. And I recently interviewed a Hispanic consultant, an expert in messaging to Hispanic Americans as well as everyone else in Central South America, Mexico, etc. And she was educating me that to say I'm progressive to someone from a culture where they ran away from a dictatorship that represented themselves as progressive. For me to say I'm a progressive in their mind triggers I'm an authoritarian dictator. Or if Kamala Harris did that, it brings up the wrong associations. So we need to be culturally sensitive to who we're talking to, what their history is, what their background is, and find common ground. And I'm a love guy. So I believe in the great commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And loving yourself is part of the equation, by the way. That's often left out in fundamentalist religious groups and cults, that you should love others, but not love yourself. Loving includes knowing your flaws, that you're not perfect, that you do mess up and make mistakes. The key thing is realigning your core values. Let's see. Let's move on. Hannah on TikTok, repeat viewer. Thank you, Hannah. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your knowledge, insight, and passion to help others. Thank you, Hannah. It really means a lot to me. And I love hearing from folks. I just recently heard from someone on LinkedIn that apparently I helped in the late 70s. And she just, let me know she's 72 now and her life's going really well. I love that. I love hearing from folks who were touched by reading one of my books or heard me give a talk, or I was asked to consult with their family. It makes me very energized to keep going. Let's see. Angela, hi, thank you. What do we say when Trump voters complain about the bad things that are happening? Like what is my question? You need to be a little more explicit for me to give an answer. But as a communications person, as a therapist, I'm always interested in understanding who it is I am talking to and what their background is, and trying to channel my messaging so that it fits, so that it lands. So, for example, I just had a consultation with a lawyer yesterday, and I asked him what he did. He said, I'm a lawyer. So as soon as I heard lawyer, I wanted to know what kind of law he was involved with. And then I proceeded to tell him how I went and did my doctoral dissertation, because I wanted to explain to judges and juries and lawyers my bite model of authoritarian control and how it can be useful to specifically identify undue influence in courts of law. So I was able to understand his training and background and find a direct connection, because he called me to help his daughter, but to know that he could read my dissertation aimed at updating the law and learn about Lifton's model of brainwashing and Singer's model and Shine's model and Shefflin's social influence model and my model, it gives him a framework where he can be more effective. So the key thing is always, who are you speaking with? And building connection with them first before you try to ask questions or do any type of persuasion. Let's see. Secret Lives of Chicken Wives. That's interesting. How do we volunteer? Where can we go to sign up? Thank you for asking. Our main email is center, CENTER, at freedomofmind.com. And put in the subject line, wish to volunteer. If you have a resume or a CV with what your background is, what your talents are, let us know if you're a former member. Let us know if you've read any of my books or taken my courses or are reading my blogs on Substack, etc. I just had a wonderful call with a therapist who attended one of my CE webinars, who had told me she had been raised in a family cult that she left it when she was 27. And she recently had a therapist who said, it sounds like you were raised in a cult. And then she took my course, my hour thing that I did. And we talked, and she's Harvard. She's a psychologist. She is awesome, but she's now going to learn about cults and brainwashing and mind control. So we have so much more we have to be doing to teach people, to help people identify that they had this experience, that you can name it, and that there's a specialized way to help people get whole again, having been raised in a cult like that. I'm constantly interviewing interesting people about their books, and we make a transcript of it, and we ask volunteer bloggers to generate a draft of what are the key elements of that interview, and then I go through it, and then I send it to the guests. So we have about 5 or 6 sitting that we need more volunteers. So if you're a good writer and want to help, please email us. Let's see, a Time Lord Mandalorian. That's a repeat person because I recognize your name. Thanks for coming back. Hi, Dr. Hassan. Did you see the member of British Parliament called the JWs a cult? Actually, I did. Yeah. So the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, uh, is a group that I didn't know was a mind control cult till 1989. My book came out in 88, my first book, Combating. And I started hearing from former elders who said, how come you didn't mention the Watchtower? So I've learned a lot about this group and helped a ton of people to exit. The Mormons also, I might add. And we really want to encourage the law and governments to be able to name authoritarian mind control cults that don't allow basic human rights for their members. Like, we should not give a religious exemption because the IRS says Scientology is a religion, so you can't criticize them as trafficking. It's like, no, let's look at the behaviors. And so we really have a lot to do to get into the 21st century, because I've studied hypnosis for 40 years, and the public still doesn't understand how our minds can have beliefs installed deceptively that we would never agree to believing in the first place. And yes, my helper says Time Lord Mandalorian is a regular viewer also every week. Thank you for coming by. And honestly, I'm thinking of doing some Substack lives. I've talked with a couple of people, including Monty Mader, who's this awesome refugee from Christian nationalism who knows the Bible really well. She interviewed me for her podcast. I've interviewed her for mine, and she and I are talking about doing an Instagram live, which I would love to do with her, because I think she has a lot to say, and we're just getting to know each other. So stay tuned. If you don't get our weekly newsletter on Tuesdays, it's free. You can sign up. And we're asking for $5 a month for Substack if you want beyond, I think it's a couple of weeks of free access to all of my past blogs. Yeah, help us, or come to our YouTube and subscribe to Premium. Let's see. Xstar Neon Raven. Xstar Neon Raven. I'm concerned for young people. A Bible verse talks about those who corrupt youth, and Trumpism is encouraging immorality, hatred, and what has been termed Trump contagion. I share your concern. You know, we should be role modeling ethical behavior. And when somebody holds the most powerful office in the world and drops an F-bomb, as Trump did last week, it's sending the wrong message to young people. And so, how to explain to our children? I like to recommend that people download my Influence Continuum graphic. It's free. It's on freedomofmind.com under Learn. And sit down with your kids and explain ethical influencers do these things, and authoritarian mind control cults and cult leaders do the things on this side. And explain the bite model, because the more people can know in advance what to look out for, the more you're going to be able to assist them. Let's see. Sandra says, "What do you? Why do you think the Democrats, who I would assume want Trump out, voted against impeachment himself?" I don't know what that means, Sandra. Maybe you could rewrite that. I'm not aware that any Democrat voted against Trump's impeachment.
She meant to
Um,
say, I think, who I assume voted against him. She said, "Why do you think Democrats who would assume to want Trump out vote against him? Vote against impeaching him?" I think that's the question.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. It could be a practicality that they feel like the Democrats may feel like they have a limited amount of time and attention, and because there's not the votes to win an impeachment process, that it would distract. That's the only thing I can think of. Impeachment takes an extraordinary amount of time and energy, and right now we're in crisis mode. And we want to encourage people to call staffers, particularly of GOP Congress people, and tell them why they need to vote no for this monstrosity abomination bill, and to just keep calling. I hear from former staffers that it really makes a difference. And I'll also like to just point out that Republicans have stopped having town hall meetings, unlike Democrats who continue to have town hall meetings. But the Republican ones don't want town hall meetings because they don't want their constituents to yell at them and show their displeasure. And that's really interesting, too. Let's see. Be Heard on TikTok says, please contact Michael Cohen, do a live stream with him on Substack. So Michael Cohen has invited me to do a live with him, and so has Lev Parnas. I did couple with Lev. Good idea. And I want to let everybody who's listening to me understand that it works better often when listeners and supporters tell people like Michael Cohen or whomever, have Dr. Steve Hassan on. I really would like to hear that. It works better than Steve Hassan saying, "Hey, Michael, you said we would do a live stream. When you want to do it?" It's just the way it is. And folks who have followers, regular followers, they're going to listen to them. And I appreciate people emailing me and messaging me. I should contact Oprah Winfrey because I was on her show in 1989. And to which I say, I don't have a relationship with Oprah Winfrey. If you do, or you know someone who works with her, please contact them and suggest me. So that's another way you can help, is if you follow influencers and you think that they would benefit from learning more about the cult of Trump and brainwashing and cults, please do that. And Be Heard is a regular who tunes in on TikTok every week. Thank you, B, and thank you, Cami, for letting me know that Be Heard is a regular. Really means a lot to me. Let's see. Brianna, a regular viewer on Instagram, says, I find myself skeptical of religions now. How do we make space for the spiritual and cheer it on for others? And thank you for all that you do. Um, I don't know your backstory, Brianna. I can tell you that when I first got out of the Moonies, I was angry at God. Like I was praying 4 hours a day, 7 days a week in the Moonies, thinking I was following God. And when my mind opened up and I realized Moon was a liar and untrustworthy and a cult leader, I got angry at God. Like, God, how could you have not told me? And you know, it was where I was at 49 years ago, and I didn't know what to believe, what to trust, and I had to go through a very determined deconstruction of what did I learn in the Moonies. I had to read the Divine Principle textbook, which is supposedly, I was told as a Moonie, was a completed testament, better than the New and Old Testament. I had to reread everything, and I needed to talk to theologians and scholars. I needed to get reacquainted with Judaism because the Judaism that I was raised with didn't make sense and couldn't answer the questions that were raised when I became a lecturer for the Moonies and taught their ideology, the divine principle. I think knowing the influence continuum clearly is a great tool to reality test, because there are a lot of healthy religious organizations where they may have rules and regulations, but you have fully informed consent. You can ask questions directly and get direct answers. If they say you can look at our accounting records before you give a donation, ask to see the accounting records, because legitimate churches and synagogues will allow that. And ones that are hiding and doing criminal activity will make any excuse in the world but show you that. And so, reality test, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I choose to believe in a universe that's coherent and follows principles of science, and I believe that the human species has been so successful because of trust and out of love, and not because of greed and selfishness. So that's my rant on that topic. In a different dimension, I also was wondering if you could consider drafting a bite model that uses fewer $10 words. I can't get other people to pay attention because they can't understand it. Absolutely. I am totally open to updating my bite model. And if there are words or concepts you think that need to be better explained linguistically, please let us know. Email us. There's a whole developmental graphic that I want to be developing a model for, based on Eric Erickson and my first wife, Orit Baryam Hassan's identity developmental model, because that's another part of understanding, especially for people born or raised in cults, to understand what healthy parenting is supposed to be like versus corporal punishment and mind control and dependency is about. So there's lots of possible improvements, and I welcome feedback to make things better. Time Lord Mandalorian, Dr. Hassan, a member of British Parliament, is an ex-JW. He's trying to get the British government to have a royal commission on the case in the Watchtower, and then the member of Parliament called the Jehovah's Witnesses a cult. So all I can say is there are a lot of former cult members out there. Many of them have not identified themselves, like super famous influencers. I've had a few clients that I'm not able to say their names, and they're still afraid to tell the public they were in Scientology or the Moonies or any number of other mind control cults. And when I hear of an influencer, a politician, a mental health professional who self-identifies as a former member, I'm like, yay, yay. Because we need to normalize this. We need to destigmatize this. And from the beginning of 1976, I knew that I was intelligent. I knew that I was an extra honor student. I knew that I came from a good family. So when the public, in their ignorance, said I was stupid, I was gullible, I was weak, I needed a father figure, and all these other ridiculous theories, I knew that it just fell off. It just like was not relevant because I knew myself. I knew my history. And unlike folks born into cults, I was recruited at age 19. So I had an identity to come back to that anchors me. Secret Lives of Chicken Wives. How do you protect yourself from emotional burnout when dealing with people of opposing viewpoints? I confess I have been burned out more times than I want to state publicly. I'm in a state of burnout right now. I have not gone scuba diving in years. It's the thing that relaxes me the most. And it's on my agenda to get back underwater and swim with fish because it's the most relaxing thing I know to do. And all I can say is that I've made a lot of attention on sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night, going to bed earlier, turning off my phone, not putting upsetting content into my brain when I'm trying to wind down. My favorite bedtime music on Spotify is peaceful piano. So I use it for an hour to like wind down. And I try my best to go listen to live music, go dancing, see friends, and think about hopeful things that I want to do, that I'm able to do. So, and someone's asking me, so what is your religion right now? I identify as a Jew. I belong to a very progressive Jewish community here in Northampton. I'm still a member of the Brookline community that I was very active in for 26 years before I moved to Northampton. I like the rituals. I like davening. I like studying Torah. I like learning. I like the social justice efforts that my folks do. And yeah, I like that Abraham would challenge God and question God, and so would Moses. And I like that we don't have a human that's elevated to God level. I like that, this is the story of a flawed people, and it may or may not be true historically, but what can we learn from the stories of the Torah and the Mishnah and all the interpretations? The Heritage Detective says, I read that you were raised Jewish. Do you still carry some of your beliefs? I believe I've seen you recently learning about Jewish Kabbalah. Yes. Yeah. So I invite you to my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan. I've interviewed Kabbalah scholars, especially around a cult called the Kabbalah Learning Center that Madonna is very publicly identified with. The Bergs, that's the two, the head Bergs have died, but the son Michael continues this awful group. I've interviewed my rabbi, Moshe Waldoks, who I credit with helping me find my way back to Judaism some 26 years ago. And like I said, I love to learn. I love to learn about other religions. And I don't believe anything is inerrant. I think everything has context And a book that I read, for example, by Friedman, who wrote the Bible, goes through the Torah and shows there are four distinct voices in the storytelling of the Old Testament. That if you understand the four different perspectives, it's clear this is not one Almighty God's point of view on this religion. This was human contributions. Brianna, sorry, Wilcox Campbell. I find myself skeptical of religions now. Be skeptical. Why? What's wrong with being skeptical? How do you make space for the spiritual and cheer it on for others? Thank you so much for all that you do. See, the thing is that I just really think that we need to make a distinction between reacting against something that we got harmed by and where we're at today and where we want to go to in the future. So, for example, people might leave the Moonies like I did. I wasn't allowed to hug a woman. I thought women were evil and Satan was in them trying to harm me. And I wasn't allowed to grow a beard. And so, in my early days of recovery, I went out with women all the time and I grew a beard and I was reacting against what my experience was. And I may have gone to an extreme, but then I kind of came back to who would I have been if I had never been recruited into the Moonies? And I think in the end, people need to just be in their bodies and really listening to their gut, really open to all the parts of their psyche, including if they have a negative voice in their head, identifying, is that my grandfather's voice? Is that the cult leader's voice? You know, whose voice is that? And should I give this voice power over who I am today? So my relationship with myself is one of being my own best friend, and having a sense of values where I love to learn. I have an innate curiosity. I like meeting new people and doing new things. So that's what works for me. I should also say I've had therapists for decades, many different ones who've taught me a lot about how to be a good therapist with people. I don't believe there's one way to do therapy. And I'd say there's an overwhelming mistake that trauma therapists make in trauma processing, where they're not focusing enough on the here and now functionality and how to help people be functional in the future. They spend way too much time and energy thinking that they have to dig up everything from a traumatic past. And that I just haven't found that to be necessary, and also can even be harmful. Let's see, Zariban, why Jehovah Witness organization is a cult. So just to be clear, I'm taking back my influence continuum graphic. And some of my colleagues don't agree with me on this, but I say cults exist on the ethical side all the way to the authoritarian side. And when I talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses, I talk about it as an authoritarian mind control cult, because I have a model that I call the bite model of authoritarian control. And I have another display. This is also on my website for free, with behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And people can go through these two charts, and you can, if you're interested in the Jehovah's Witnesses, I already have up on my Substack the bite model analysis for the Watchtower organization. I have it up for the LDS as well as many other cults. And you can also understand, this is another graphic I like to teach with, that many people meet a cult and they're fringe members. Maybe they do TM 20 minutes a day, but they've never done all the courses. They didn't become celibate. They didn't pay $3,000 to learn how to hop on mattresses. Didn't know that Maharishi was sleeping with his girlfriend. So you can have very different types of experiences in a group that's an authoritarian cult, where it doesn't feel like it's authoritarian. And that's why I really teach perspective, like step back, gather information, go to people that are accountable and legitimate sources for information, and you make up your own mind. Focus Lady, I'm a research coordinator at a university. Can you recommend de-escalation strategies with research evidence for people to negotiate with MAGA cult members that draw guns in response to questions? I'm going to need to think about your question. Can I recommend de-escalation strategies? Yes. With research evidence, I don't know of any documented peer-reviewed published journals on de-escalation strategies. So sorry, I can't help with that. And as far as if people are drawing guns in response to questions, I would definitely exit from that proximity as quickly as possible, because people shoot guns, especially if they're angry or upset. And I myself do not want to be shot at and don't want to be concerned about my well-being. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. I know we're coming to the end of our hour. Quick story. I was invited by the mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, when the Moonies first purchased the University of Connecticut, Bridgeport. And he was taking me around to meet different officials to explain why I thought it was a bad idea for the university to be purchased by the Moonies cult. And the mayor, his name is Bill Finch, who invited me on a radio show recently. So I reconnected with Bill and shared this story with him. He said to me, that guy over there, he's the local Moonie. And so I just walked over to him and I reached my hand out. I said, "Hi, I'm Steve Hassan." And the guy looked like he was a football linebacker, and he turned and looked at me in the eyes and started to make a fist and started to cock his hand. And the mayor stood in front of me and pushed me back so the guy wouldn't clock me in the face. And I said to Bill, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Are you kidding me? The guy was going to hit you, Steve." And I said, "Oh, Bill, I've been hit before by Moonies." And he said, "Steve, I think you need to talk to your therapist about this one. He could break your jaw. He could, give you brain damage, punch your eyeball out. You don't want people hitting your head." And he was right. But, it's, again, a learning thing. I came to realize, I was still operating from a part of the Mooney identity, that I was a martyr, and it was okay to put myself in harm's way. Ever since that episode, somebody wants to hit me, I step back. I turn. It's an opportunity to run. Happy to run. I'd rather avoid a conflict. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we're living in a unique time. I really want to encourage people to sleep well, exercise, eat well, hang out with people in real life, organize locally. If you have talents and abilities, if you're a good public speaker, please consider running for local political office. Volunteer for your elections, personnel. If you're good at developing social media posts, we need all the help we can get, honestly, because we want to reach a bigger audience. And in particular, I come back to what I said before. If this abomination bill passes, there's going to be millions of people who are going to be very angry at Donald Trump and the GOP. And we want to embrace people and welcome them. The last thing we should be saying to folks who are angry at Trump is, I told you so, or how come you didn't listen to me? And I'm saying this because it actually happened to me when I first got out of the Moonies. I had friends who said, I told you it was a frickin' cult. How come you didn't listen to me? You know, I told you he was a fraud. And it just made me feel terrible. You know, it may have made them feel good to say, I told you so, but it made me feel the opposite of what I think we need to do with folks who wake up, are ashamed, embarrassed, confused. We want to be like, welcome. And now we need to figure out together what we can do to turn things around and not be accepting these horrendous authoritarian moves that are being pushed on us. And I'd like to believe the DNA of Americans is freedom centered. I like to believe that people will not want to lose their ability to speak freely. In fact, I want to call out the Koch Corporation, which I did an interview with the man who wrote a book on it called Kochland, and it is a corporate cult and responsible. I think the father created the John Birch Society and such. They created an entity called FIRE for free speech, only they won't allow negative speech against fossil fuels or climate change or against them. So this whole BS that they're for free speech isn't real. They wanted to be able to disrupt our system of democracy, the checks and balances, the separation of church and state. And these billionaires, including Trump, who likes to sue because they have money, that takes away free speech if people are afraid of getting sued by someone who has more money than them, right? So come to my Dr. Stephen Hassan YouTube, my Substack. I believe it's Cult Expert, or maybe it's Stephen Hassan. I actually don't remember. Cult Expert is my call for on Instagram, I believe, and a few other things. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And please learn. Please listen to my books. Ask your local library to order more copies of The Cult of Trump. It's still the best explanatory framework for what's happening in the United States. And if you're a research coordinator at a university-focused lady and want to collaborate on research projects on how to help people exit mind control cults, I would encourage your researchers to start with reading my books and my courses, and happy to collaborate. I'm now a Fielding Fellow from Fielding Graduate University, and we're about to launch a new version of the BiteModel.com survey. Currently, it's free, anonymous, 40 questions of the bite model. You can identify where on the pyramid you are, identify the group, healthy group or unhealthy group. But we have a new version that we're getting ready with 20 questions that we think it fulfills the highest level of scientific muster. And so we want to try it out and hear your feedback. So with that, I want to thank Jerry, Cami, and my whole team, and everyone who's listened, everyone who's helped make contributions, and anyone who wants to help volunteer. Please let us know, because it's really going to take a big village to be pro-democracy, folks. Take care. Till next week. Thanks.